These are the 10 worst South Park episodes ever, according to IMDB. And at number 10, the return of Chef brutally killing off one of the most beloved characters in one of South Park's episodes. The episode starts with a fake previously on South Park segment showing Chef, many people's favorite character, leaving to join the Super Adventure Club because he's bored and looking for adventure. The boys are devastated seeing Chef go. Cartman even cries, which is shocking enough, but the whole town sends Chef off with hopes that he'll find what he's looking for. It all feels like a farewell for the guy everyone loves. Fast forward 3 months, and suddenly, Chef is back. He walks right up to the boys and greets them like nothing's even happened. They're thrilled, thinking everything's back to normal. But right away, something feels off. Clyde casually mentions that Chef said something creepy to him, but the boys blow it off, thinking Clyde is just being Clyde. But as soon as Chef starts making super inappropriate comments, it's clear that something is seriously wrong. And when the police get involved, we realize this isn't just some small glitch. Chef's been brainwashed. The boys decide to head to the Super Adventure Club to find out what's really going on. When they get there, they discover that the club Chef joined isn't about adventures or exploring the world at all. Turns out they're literally a bunch of pedophiles who travel all around the world doing horrific things to children, and the boys are absolutely horrified. But that doesn't mean they don't have a plan. They take Chef to the strip club, hoping to snap him out of it. At first, it's not working, and you start thinking this is going to be a total fail, but then out comes Spontaneous Boutte, a pole dancer that finally seems to jog Chef's memory. For a second, it seems like we're getting the real Chef back. He starts remembering who he was, who he is. But of course, just as things start looking up, the Super Adventure Club shows up and shoots him with tranquilizer darts, dragging him back to their hideout. The boys chase after him, but Chef's already being brainwashed again. The club leader goes on some ridiculous rant about how molesting children makes people immortal, and while the boys try to fight back, Chef decides to stay with the club. Are you starting to see why this is one of the worst episodes of South Park? But just when you think it couldn't get any worse, Chef gets caught on a collapsing bridge and falls to his gruesome death, bouncing off rocks, getting attacked by a bear and a lion, and finally dying in probably the most brutal way South Park has ever killed off a character. The episode ends with Chef's funeral, Kyle giving a speech basically telling everyone not to be mad at Chef, but at the Super Adventure Club for messing with his head. It's sad, but wrapped up in classic South Park humor. And number 9 is about one of the weirdest episodes ever made, called South Park is Gay. We kick off with Stan, Cartman, and Kenny sporting flashy new metrosexual outfits and acting way more feminine than usual. They're all about fashion and hygiene now, thanks to the influence of shows like Queer Eye for the straight guy. But when Kyle shows up wearing his usual winter gear, they immediately shame him for being so last season. The boys drag Kyle to the mall for a full makeover, and just like that, he's swept up into the metrosexual craze. At home, Kyle's parents, Gerald and Sheila, are horrified by his new look, but soon they realize that every man in South Park, including Gerald, has also jumped on this bandwagon. The women seem to love it at first. Finally, the men care about their appearances and are obsessively clean, but things quickly start to get weird. At school, it's clear that Kyle isn't the only one who's gone metro. Even Timmy, Jimmy, and Pip have all embraced the trend. But things take a competitive turn when Craig and his gang show up, claiming they're way gayer than Stan's group. A full-on gay-off erupts between the boys, and everyone trying to outdo each other in how fashionable and effeminate they can be. Things get even worse when Cartman decides that Kyle's lack of metro enthusiasm is cramping their style. After some debate, Stan suggests just not hanging out with Kyle anymore, but when Craig's gang starts bullying Kyle for being too straight, the boys don't defend him, and Kyle ends up getting beat up. It's clear that things are spiraling out of control here, and Kyle is left feeling totally abandoned. Meanwhile, Mr. Garrison is freaking out. As one of the few people openly gay in town, he's not happy that metrosexuality has become mainstream, and he feels like his identity is being stolen. He even hatches a plan to go to New York and kill the Queer Eye for the Straight Guy cast. Kyle, feeling equally betrayed by the metro fad, decides to join him. Together, they hop on a train to New York with knives, ready to take down the source of all their problems. Back in South Park, the boys are fully absorbed in their new metro lifestyle, and the town's men decide to throw a metrosexual pride parade. But while the men are busy parading around, their wives are getting fed up with the entire thing. They realize that while they initially liked the clean and stylish version of their husbands, they missed the rugged, gross men they married. Fed up, the women band together and head to New York to put an end to the madness as well. The big twist comes when it's revealed that Queer Eye guys aren't actually gay. They're crab people. The Queer Eye guys were part of a secret plot by the crab people to take over the world by turning everyone metrosexual and weakening society. Until the women of South Park storm in and beat the crabs to death with wooden clubs, ending the metrosexual craze once and for all. With the fad over with, life in South Park returns to normal, or at least normal for South Park standards. The boys go back to their usual selves, but Kyle isn't so quick to forgive them for ditching him. Still, by the end of the episode, he gives in and joins them for a game of catch, because at the end of the day, they're still his best friends for some reason. At number 8, the episode The New Terrence and Phillip Movie Trailer trolled the boys with a fake movie trailer that they were excited for. It all starts with Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Butters gearing up for the big night at Stan's house to watch Fighting Around the World with Russell Crowe and catch the exclusive trailer during one of the commercial breaks. Sounds easy, sounds simple, right? Wrong! Enter Shelly. Stan's sister Shelly storms in, demanding to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She doesn't care about the trailer, and in classic Shelly fashion, she delights in making Stan and his friends absolutely miserable. After some begging, she agrees to let them watch Russell Crowe, but only if one of them buys her tampons. Of course, Butters draws the short end of the stick and gets sent out on this unfortunate errand. While Butters is out, Cartman decides the TV's colors are saturated and tries to fix them. Predictably, Cartman, being Cartman, manages to blow up the entire TV. Now the boys are in full panic mode because the trailer could air at any moment. Butters returns to the tampons just in time to head out with the rest of the boys to Kyle's house, and things seem to be back on track when they settle back at Kyle's place. But then Gerald shows up and demands the TV back because it's time for Ike's beloved news hour show thing. So back to it, they're off again, scrambling to find another TV. After ruling out Cartman's house and Butters's, the boys head to Chef's place. Luckily, Chef has a brand new plasma screen. Everything's looking up, but of course, there's another problem. Chef can't figure out how to use the darn remote. Chef accidentally activates HEM mode, which stands for Human Eradication Mode. While it runs amok outside, shooting everything in sight, the boys once again have to find another TV. Talk about running away from your problems. They hit up the local bar, hoping to catch the trailer there. However, the bartender isn't fooled when Kyle tries to pass them off as midgets. With no luck at the bar, the boys finally crash at Shady Acres retirement home and hijack the old folks' TV. But as things seem to be going their way, as always, the elderly residents literally crap their pants to drive the boys out. With nowhere else to go, they finally return to Cartman's house, even though it's still being fumigated. The toxic gas fills the room and the boys nearly pass out trying to watch Russell Crowe. Stan's house literally has a black and white TV. Butters drops a bombshell. He never delivered Shelly's tampons. Sure enough, as they arrive at Stan's house, Shelly's rage literally explodes in a flood of blood, and the boys are washed back into the street. In desperation, they spot some crack addicts watching TV and join them, but Chef's rampaging robot TV shows up and destroys their last hope. It's absolute chaos. So the final commercial break just seconds away, the boys finally rush to Butters' empty house, realizing his TV's just been sitting there unused the whole time. At long last, the commercial break hits and the Terrence and Phillip trailer airs, and it's just a vague, ridiculous clip of the two farting in cowboy hats. But of course, that's all the boys need. They're ecstatic. After all that mayhem, it was totally worth it. At number 7, Wieners Out took Butters from innocent kid to leader of a bizarre masculinity movement. It all starts when Butters feels deeply betrayed. His long-distance girlfriend Charlotte dumps him over Skype, citing that she needs to stand with her girlfriends. Butters is devastated, but instead of wallowing in self-pity, he channels his anger into something much bigger. In his mind, the girls' actions, breaking up with their boyfriends and boycotting the boys, are part of a coordinated attack on all boys. Butters refuses to be a victim of this and sees this as a war on masculinity itself. And if there's one thing Butters will not stand for, it's being ashamed of who he is. From there, Butters starts giving fiery speeches to the other boys, urging them to stand up for themselves. He believes the girls are trying to make them feel guilty just for being boys. And it's here that we get the hilarious yet bizarre rallying cry, the episode Wieners Out! Butters encourages the boys to literally protest by pulling down their pants and proudly showing their wieners as a statement of defiance. He even accuses Kyle of being an Uncle Kyle because Kyle is trying to bridge the gap between boys and girls. To Butters, anyone who sides with the girls or suggests that the boys should apologize is a traitor to their own kind. The culmination of Butters' rebellion happens at the girls' volleyball game. Kyle has convinced a large group of boys to show up in support of the girls, thinking it would help repair their relationship. But Butters got other plans. As soon as the national anthem plays, Butters pulls his pants down and raises his fist in the the air, his own strange, defiant protest. To Kyle's horror, more boys join Butters, and soon enough, half of the boys at the game are standing there, pants to their ankles, chanting, "Wieners out!" Number 6, the super hard PC-ness is about the time Kyle went crazy over watching a TV show. We then see the boys watching Terrence and Phillip, which is now slower and somehow even grosser because the duo is old and their fart jokes have aged about as well as Cartman's personality. Kyle, however, is having a full-on existential crisis. For the first time, he actually feels bad for the people getting farted on. And you know when Kyle starts overthinking something, things are about to spiral out of control. Kyle's guilt over Terrence and Phillip turns into full-blown rage, and he decides that the show and Canadian culture, for that matter, are to blame for America's problems. So naturally, he goes on a crusade to get it canceled. At this point, Kyle's gone full-on Karen mode. He's out here demanding that fart jokes be banned. Yeah, that's right. Kyle's gone from moral compass to buzzkill in record time. What was the clock on that? Kyle's anti-Canada crusade goes nuclear. Literally. Thanks to his crusade, President Garrison ends up nuking Canada. Classic South Park escalation, right? What started as Kyle just trying to get Terrence and Phillip canceled ends with an actual nuclear strike on an entire country. Kyle even watches it all happen on TV, realizing that maybe, just maybe, he's taken things a bit too far. At number 5, the China problem was so explosive, it didn't just offend people, it got South Park wiped off the face of Chinese television entirely. We start with Cartman having a full-blown nightmare after watching the 2008 Beijing Olympics. But it's not just the fireworks and synchronized drumming that are haunting him. Oh no, Cartman is convinced that China is plotting to take over the world. The next day at the bus stop, Cartman tries to rally Stan, Kyle, and Kenny into action against the supposed Chinese invasion, but this time, Cartman's usual rants don't even get a rise out of Kyle. Instead, Kyle just frackin' walks away, totally over Cartman's antics. It's clear Kyle's got bigger issues on his mind. And boy does he! Kyle is still reeling from something far more personal. The cinematic betrayal of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Kyle genuinely feels like he's watched one of his childhood heroes get assaulted and he just can't get over it. Stan tries to talk him down, saying they need to move on, but Kyle's stuck in his trauma. The idea of aliens in an Indiana Jones movie is haunting his dreams, and he can't stop thinking about how Spielberg and Lucas destroyed Indiana Jones with the film's plot. Later that night, Kyle's nightmare takes a dark turn. In his dreams, Spielberg and Lucas are, inappropriately touching Indiana Jones in a movie theater while he and the boys watch helplessly. Yeah, that's quite the nightmare. When he wakes up, Kyle is more determined than ever to bring Spielberg and Lucas to justice for what they've done. Meanwhile, Cartman recruits the ever-gullible Butters into his crusade against China. He convinces Butters that if they don't act, the Chinese will murder his parents. Classic Cartman manipulation, guys. Butters, scared out of his mind, agrees to join what Cartman calls the American Liberation Front, which is basically just the two of them going on a wild goose chase. The next day, Cartman and Butters head to P.F. Chang's, of all places, decked out in horribly offensive Chinese costumes to gather intel on the Chinese invasion. Their genius plan is to harass a Chinese family and try to extract invasion plans out of them. It quickly escalates in Cartman holding the entire restaurant hostage, with Butters accidentally getting his hands on a whole gun. And this is all while Cartman's convinced that he's saving America from a global threat, completely unaware of how ridiculous the situation has become. Over at the courthouse, Kyle, Stan, and the rest of the boys take their case against Spielberg and Lucas to a lawyer. They argue that the directors literally raped Indiana Jones by making Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and surprisingly, the attorney agrees to take their case. Turns out the trauma of that movie goes deeper than just the boys. It's a sentiment shared by many, including the lawyer himself. As the situation at P.F. Chang's escalates, Cartman starts to realize that maybe his mission to save America has gone a little off the rails, especially after Butters accidentally shoots someone in the groin for the second time. Cartman's not cool with it, and this marks his breaking point. He starts to question whether his fear of the Chinese has turned him into a monster. He decides that he can't keep going like this, and he walks away from the American Liberation Front, leaving Butters bewildered. In a twist, the boys' case against Spielberg and Lucas actually goes somewhere. The police raid Skywalker Ranch and catch the directors in the act of, you guessed it, touching a stormtrooper. As Cartman and Butters leave P.F. Chang's, Cartman reflects on what he's learned. He realizes that America might be better off losing to the Chinese than becoming a nation of people who shoot each other in the groin. At number 4, Goth Kids 3 Dawn of the Posers turn the beloved Goth Kids into conformist zombies. We kick off with the Goth Kids doing their usual thing, sitting in Henrietta's room, listening to her read dark, angsty poetry. They're all in their gloomy element when Henrietta's mom barges in, calling her a princess. But things get worse. Henrietta's parents tell her that they've had enough of her emo behavior and are sending her to a camp for troubled kids. The next next day, the remaining Goths, Michael, Pete, and Ferkel, gather by the school to talk about Henrietta's fate. Michael's been texting her, but the messages stopped when she reached the camp. That's when things start to feel a bit eerie. The group begins to worry that Henrietta might come back as an emo, and let's face it, in the Goth world, that's practically the apocalypse. When Henrietta finally returns, the Goths are horrified. She's got pink highlights in her hair, wearing preppy accessories, and worst of all, she's hanging out with the emo kids. Determined to save their friend, the Goths head to Child Protective Services to report what they believe is straight-up child abuse. They try to explain the difference between Goths and emos to a completely clueless social worker, but no one gets it, and they're left on their own to figure out how to save Henrietta from the clutches of emo dom. Michael confronts Henrietta at her house, but she's just too far gone, dude. She's fully embraced the emo way of life, and she tries to recruit Michael into joining the emo ranks. Realizing that the emo problem is much bigger than just Henrietta, Michael flees and calls Pete and Ferkel. The situation is dire, and they need help. So Pete suggests turning to their sworn enemies, the Vamp Kids. The Goths and Vamp Kids have a long-standing feud. They did burn down the Vamp Kids' Hot Topic hangout after all, but desperate times call for desperate measures. They approach the vampires and propose an alliance to stop the emo takeover, and reluctantly, the Vamp Kids actually agree. The two groups spy on Henrietta and her new emo friends, who are full of cringeworthy dialogue about how much life sucks and how they'd rather die than participate in gym class. The Goths and Vamps realize they need more firepower, so they perform a summoning ritual to call upon the original Goth King, Edgar Allan Poe. Poe, however, is not exactly impressed. He immediately, no holds barred, starts roasting the Vamp Kids and calls them posers, but after some convincing, Poe, now going by his goth name, Night Pain, agrees to help stop the emo invasion. Cutting to Michael, he's tied up at Troubled Acres where he discovers that the emos are being created by strange, self-mutilating plants. The Emo King is a massive ficus plant that's controlling everything. Just as things are starting to look grim, the Goths, Vamps, and Poe arrive to save him. Ferkel reveals to be a traitor. He's been emo all along. But just as the emos prepare to turn everyone, Edgar Allan Poe steps up. He shoots the Emo King plant, only to reveal it's just a regular ficus from Lowe's. Turns out the whole emo thing was a reality TV prank show called Yes, I Was Scared. The old gardener working at Troubled Acres has been duped, and so had Ferkel, who betrayed his friends for no good reason. Back at Henrietta's house, the Goths break the news to her. The emo thing, yeah, it was all a joke. But instead of telling her the truth, they lie and say they burned the camp down. Relieved, Henrietta shakes off her emo persona and returns to her goth roots just in time to yell at her mom one last time. At number 3, going native took Butters on an identity crisis. Cartman runs into the cafeteria breathless and ready to spill the tea. Butters just beat up Scott Malkinson. But when they head to the bathroom to confront him, they find out something's off with their usually mild-mannered friend. Butters locks himself into the stall and lashes out, calling the boys fake and saying that the only one with dignity is Kenny. The fallout leads to a meeting in Principal Victoria's office where Butters' parents, Linda and Steven, explain that Butters' outburst is a sign that he's reached a coming-of-age moment for their people. Oh yeah, in a bizarre twist also, it turns out the Stotch family is native Hawaiian, and Butters has to return to his birthplace to undergo a traditional Hawaiian rite of passage called the Hapanoa. Meanwhile, Butters is confused and frustrated. He's not just acting out, he's told he has to travel to his native land, which isn't South Park, but Hawaii. Steven hands Butters a Mahalo rewards card, which apparently unlocks everything he'll need for this rite of passage, and Butters is off to rediscover his roots. Of course, no adventure is complete without a sidekick. Enter Kenny. The other boys push Kenny to go after Butters and make sure he's okay. At the airport, Kenny finds Butters in a mess, too worked up to even get on the plane. And after some chaos at the check-in counter, Kenny decides to tag along, much to Butters' relief. The two of them are soon off to Hawaii, and thus begins one of the weirdest cultural journeys South Park has ever presented. Upon landing, Butters is welcomed by a group of middle-aged Hawaiians, though they're not exactly what you'd expect from traditional natives. They're timeshare owners and vacationers, who insist on being recognized as native because of their long-time visits to the island. They proudly flash their rewards cards as well, which seem to be the key to unlocking every discount and perk on the island. Butters quickly gets indoctrinated into their native customs, which mostly revolve around golf, drinking chi-chis, and bocce ball. As the boys settle into island life, Kenny sends a letter back to the rest of the gang in South Park, narrating how Butters is slowly becoming one with the natives. But don't worry, he still ends the letter with a typical Kenny comment about how nice the boobs he saw on the beach were. Just when things start to mellow out, a new crisis hits. The Mahalo Rewards program, the thing that makes these Hawaiians feel special, is getting canceled. This sends Butters and the rest of the natives into a rage. They take up arms, well, golf clubs, and prepare for a war against the tourists. Butters, still riding the emotional wave of his rite of passage, gets roped into leading an attack on a cruise ship. In typical Butters fashion, he's horrified when his golf ball accidentally sinks the entire ship, leading to a full-on media frenzy. The US Coast Guard gets involved, and things escalate to an all-out war between the natives and the government. While Butters and his fellow locals are throwing golf balls at Coast Guard ships, Kenny is off on his own side quest. He stumbles upon the Cocoa Palms, a long-abandoned hotel where he discovers the ghost of Elvis Presley, of all people. In true South Park style, Elvis leads Kenny to a secret stash of ingredients for Chi-Chi's, saving the day by replenishing the island's supply of the beloved drink. In the end, the US government caves to the locals' demands, reinstating the rewards program. With peace restored, Butters can finally complete his rite of passage and put his anger behind him. The episode wraps up with Butters and Kenny receiving their own Mahalo rewards cards as honorary Hawaiians. Butters even has a personal breakthrough. While he's been wrestling with deep-rooted anger throughout the whole episode, it turns out what really bothered him was Ben Affleck. Turns out Butters couldn't handle that Ben Affleck has everything: good looks, success, and a relationship with Jennifer Lopez. But when he learns that Affleck is actually married to Jennifer Garner, his jealousy melts away and the weight lifts off his shoulders. At number 2, the problem with Apu was so controversial it left viewers questioning whether South Park had gone too far. Mayor McDaniels and the city council are dealing with budget cuts, and the first thing on the chopping block is the Christmas pageant. Mr. Hanky, who's been running the holiday show for years, is called in and given the bad news. Half of his budget is slashed. And oh yeah, people find him offensive. It's kind of hard to make a family-friendly Christmas show when your lead is a piece of talking pope. Naturally, Hanky doesn't take this well. Things get worse when the town discovers that Mr. Hanky has been firing off some pretty questionable tweets. After a rough band rehearsal where Hanky's clearly stressed, he jumps on Twitter and drops insults left and right, calling the kids homos who can't play music. Kyle's in disbelief when he reads this, but Hanky brushes it off, blaming his outburst on, you guessed it, Ambien. Meanwhile, PC Principal and Strong Woman are dealing with their own drama. Turns out Strong Woman is pregnant, and not just with one baby, but 5. Here's the kicker: PC Principal's the dad, and they're trying to keep it on the down low. Strong Woman tries to move forward without addressing the obvious elephant in the room, but you can't exactly hide a baby bump or 5. To make matters worse, Strong Woman's water breaks during an assembly about in vitro fertilization, adding a solid dose of South Park level awkwardness. Mr. Hanky is fired from the Christmas pageant after the town council confronts him about his Twitter tirades. His excuse? Once again, Ambien. But the town isn't buying it, and neither is anyone else. Mr. Hanky desperately tries to find a lawyer to take his case, but no one wants to defend a talking piece of poop who's got a bad case of tweet regret. Kyle, being the loyal friend he is, tries to stand by Mr. Hanky, but when he goes to court to defend him, it's a complete disaster. The judge reads out even more offensive tweets, and instead of apologizing, Hanky doubles down and goes on a rant about how no one cares about Christmas anymore. At this point, the town's done with him, and Kyle starts to realize that maybe sticking up for Hanky isn't the best idea in 2018. Meanwhile, Strong Woman gives birth to quintuplets, and these just aren't any babies, they're PC babies. Every time someone says something remotely offensive, the babies start crying. Even a Speedy Gonzalez t-shirt sets them off. PC Principal and Strong Woman try to hide their PC offspring from the town, but it's only a matter of time before everyone finds out. As a last-ditch effort, Mr. Hanky puts on a Christmas show to win back the town meanwhile, and things seem to be going okay until the PC babies start crying and Hanky finally snaps. He tells the babies to shut up, and the crowd turns on him for good. Kyle, realizing he can't defend Hanky anymore, just walks away, leaving the dude to face the consequences of his actions alone. In the end, Mr. Hanky is exiled from South Park. He gets into a poober, a lift but for poop, and heads to a place that still accepts problematic characters, Springfield. Yes, he's welcomed with open arms by Bart Simpson and Apu because, well, Springfield's got its own set of issues. The episode wraps up with the hashtag cancel the Simpsons because South Park loves to poke fun at literally everyone. And at last, at number 1, the worst South Park episode according to IMDB, Jack of a Sores. And it certainly brings us one of the most bizarre episodes ever. The episode begins with the boys camping near Stark's Pond. After Cartman sings a song about how much he hates his friends, he heads into the woods to take care of some business. And we certainly waste no time in getting into the weirdness because he spots a yellow thing that just freaks him out. He convinces the boys to follow him and they chase the creature all the way to Jimbo and Ned's house where it gets trapped in a cage. Turns out they've just discovered a female jack-of-a-sore and it's well, annoying. Jimbo calls in the Department of Interior to investigate, and they confirm that this is, in fact, a Jackophosor. Mayor McDaniels is thrilled about the discovery and decides the town needs to take care of this rare creature. And then things get even weirder when the town finds a second Jackophosor, a male named Jackov. The town's goal? Get these two to mate and save the species. But as with all things South Park, nothing is that simple. Despite building a home for them and giving them privacy, Jackov and the female Jackophosor, Hope, have no idea how to reproduce because they don't have any genitalia. The town brings in Dr. Mephisto, who artificially inseminates Hope with Jackov's sperm, and soon enough, she gives birth to a litter of baby Jackophosors. This is where things start to go downhill fast. The Jackophosors are loud, obnoxious, and pretty much everyone in town hates them, except for Cartman. He's all in, even getting excited about the potential to repopulate the species. The Department of Interior are fed up with the Jackophosaur's antics and leaves Cartman in charge as an official wildlife officer. The town hatches a plan to get rid of the Jackophosaurs once and for all, so the mayor organizes a rigged game show, with the prize being an all-expenses-paid trip to France for Jackov and his entire family, 50 of them at this point. Jackov, of course, wins the game show with a little help from the mayor and is whisked off to the airport with his whole family, much to the town's relief. But Cartman, who has grown fond of the Jackophosors, realizes what's happening and tries to stop them from leaving. Kyle and Stan distract him by taking him on a fake wildlife expedition where Kenny gets mauled by a bear because, you know, it's South Park. By the time Cartman catches on and makes it to the airport, it's already too late. Jackov and his family are already on their way to France. The episode ends with the Jackophosors arriving in Paris, where Jackov quickly causes chaos by tripping and falling into a cafe. The French locals, however, are charmed by his clumsiness, comparing him to Jerry Lewis. If you enjoyed the video, then go subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.